Robby, I love your comparison with esports because I feel a bit like an esports athlete. I can play these games, I can use YouTube and these platforms, but I can't make money off them. Actually, strangely enough, YouTube demonetized me last year when they weren't happy with some of my content. So I haven't made a cent from them in a year. And if I want to make money, I have to find other ways to make money because the gatekeepers make the rules. And again, I might have 2 million subscribers on YouTube, but like you said, there's very few people who can negotiate terms, not to mention, first of all, maybe just publishing terms, let to mention economic terms. You can't do it. So I have to find other revenue models and go find sponsors and partners and create digital products, which is great. But like you said, with the esports people, they have to do the same thing because again, they don't have access to the capital of the game or the rules. Now with Web 3.0, it makes it different for me, for them, and I guess for everybody in the ecosystem because they have ownership.
Yes, which is why you see something like obviously in our industry, Axie Infinity has been the big success of this past year. And it's, for people not familiar, it's the most successful blockchain game of the year. And to give you an idea of the scale, they turned over $1 billion of in-game transactions in the month of August, which basically blew everybody's mind until September when that number was $2.5 billion. And so the idea that much economic value is changing hands in a game is stunning. However, it's stunning because we also look at it through the traditional lens of gaming, which is to say we expect that the game publisher would take 70% of that revenue off the table. But that's actually not what happened. Sky Mavis, who's the producer of the game, they take 4.5% of all the economic activity in the game. And as you would appreciate, that's on chain, so you can verify it. And it's the reason that it generates that economic activity is precisely because it's peer-to-peer, because it's more fair and equitable for the players. They're happy to spend money in the game because they're getting things in return. And they know that those transactions are for their own benefit. It's not just to line the pockets of the developer. And so we're seeing entirely new business models being created based upon a much fairer ecosystem of providing platforms where people can, exchange economic activity directly between themselves. So in that case, it's very similar to DeFi. It's just different types of transactions, in this case, centered around entertainment.
Let's go deep for a few minutes in on Axie Infinity because I know you guys were early investors. I went on Axie 2 months ago, Robby, and I'm 50. I haven't gamed in a while. I used to have an Atari console back in the day. It was amazing. I used to have a Nintendo. I used to play games on my Apple II Plus. Castle Wolfenstein came up the other day when I was talking to the Engine co-founder on Friday, and it brought back memories. But I haven't gamed in a while, but I thought, you know what? I'm in this space. I'm talking about it. I need to find out what's going on. So I got on. I went and got my ETH wallet fattened up. I went and bought my 3 Axies. I got them in the game, and I started playing. I'll be honest, in the first 2 minutes, one of my Axies died, and I was freaking out. I thought, that's $300 gone. But then he reappeared, and it was all good. But I could start to really understand that, okay, I had to buy into the game and buy Axies that other people had spent time creating. So I was giving them their capital back. And then I could play these and then get the tokens, and I could start to see how this was very different than any other game I had played. Maybe you can talk about Axie and how this became this play-to-earn model that I know employed tens of thousands or more people, say, during the Philippines during COVID, and how it completely changed the game of how we understand blockchain gaming.
Sure, absolutely. So Axie Infinity at its heart is, it's an idle battle game, and it's a relatively simple game from a gameplay standpoint. So don't expect, Grand Theft Auto or something like that. It's a mobile game, and it's fun. And it's got cute characters. People like to collect them. And, the guys at Sky Mavis have been plugging away at building this title over the last 4 years. So this is not an overnight success. And I think that's important to state because when you see a lot of the success in the blockchain game industry this year, most of those products have been out in the market for a long time. So companies have been really putting in the hours to create these great products. What happened at Axie Infinity is they solved the age-old problem of gaming. So the age-old problem of gaming is you typically have 2 different kinds of players in your game. You have players who have lots of time and very little money, and you have players who have lots of money and very little time. And how do you put those two constituencies together in the same place? The stereotype is, the wealthy corporate executive who plays games on their mobile while they wait for the lift or something like that, and the struggling student who has hours and hours to grind away in a game but doesn't have any money to spend. And mobile was a perfect environment for this. So the free-to-play mobile business model is largely based on the idea that 98% of the players play for free and 2% of the players spend money in the game, and the developer makes the money off of those 2%. But the 98% need to play because there needs to be activity in the game. So without those free players, then the 2% won't spend the money because the game's no fun. And so what's happening actually is that those 98% who aren't paying are actually being exploited, right? I mean, of course, they're having fun playing the game. So the argument is they're getting fun in return, but they're not getting anything out of the game, actually. They're giving their time free, donating it to the game. So what Axie does is Axie allows those free players to monetize their time because there is a blockchain infrastructure providing an economic foundation to the game. So the players who are grinding and spending time to generate Axies and compete in the battles and stuff to create those, those NFTs, those Axies in the game, they're spending their time. But they can then monetize their time by selling the Axies that they've created to people like yourself, right? Because you don't have time to spend 8 hours a day playing Axie Infinity, but you could afford the cost of entry to buy that Axie. And the exciting thing is, because those Axies, are free and composable assets, you can plug them into DeFi. You can stake them. You can get yield from them. You can do other things with them as well, outside of strictly the gameplay. And this creates a lot more value. It means Axies are more valuable because there are more things you can do with them. And so, somebody like yourself, who's a savvy DeFi investor, you come along and you say, well, actually, these Axies are kind of an interesting thing. It's like buying a painting or something else that's an investment asset that has the benefit of being fun at the same time. And so you can go and play in DeFi with your Axies and not play the game at all. But by doing that and investing in the Axies, you're supporting the ecosystem and the people, for example, in the Philippines, who are spending 8 hours a day playing to generate those Axies that you just bought. So you're actually employing those people in an indirect way. So that's the basic play to earn model. Now, the next layer on top of that is what we call the guild system. And so the guild system is an invention essentially to harness the power of players in order to fuel that whole engine. So what happened was that one of our friends who's a fantastic entrepreneur in the Philippines noticed that the Philippines had been hit really hard by COVID. There were a lot of people unemployed, and he was thinking, how can I sort of marry my love of playing this game, Axie Infinity, and do something for my local community where everybody's out of work. Maybe they could start playing Axie Infinity in order to make money in the game. But the problem they had was they couldn't afford the cost of entry because buying an Axie is expensive, particularly if you come from a developing country. And so he created software that allowed him to essentially rent his Axies to those players to allow them to use them to play in the game. And they would use their earnings in the game to pay the rent on those Axies. And this was how the guild system was born. And so he actually ended up onboarding literally millions of players into the game as a result of this, because he cut down the barrier to entry from the game. And so that's how this company called Yield Guild Games, or YGG, was created. But the cool part is that YGG, which is now, $1 billion business, and created an industry of guilds, of which, there are dozens and dozens of guilds around the world now playing different kinds of blockchain games. This was created on top of Axie Infinity, because Axie Infinity is an open platform.